Okay, hello, hello. Testing, testing. Let me know if you can see and hear me okay. This is going to be a live stream about seed starting, and I don't know that I'll have anybody watching live, but if you do watch live, just say hi. Let me know if you can see and hear me okay. But let's see if I can bring that up. There we go. Anyway, I need to start kale seeds, basil, Thai basil, and arugula, so that we can eat that stuff indoors during the winter. It's the last day in September right now, so it's probably a little later than ideal to start the winter seeds, but you know, it's always worth doing even if you're late. I've learned. So anyway, I just did a live stream earlier today with all like over 35 minutes. So it was really detailed about what equipment I use, like what soil I use, what seed trays, cell trays and all that. So you could watch that. But this is about just doing it and showing you part of the way live. So the seeds are really tiny. So I think you will go less crazy if you have something that you can get the teeny seeds on first before you put them in the soil. So because they're so small, you can't just pick up, 2 or 3 with your fingers. It's not going to work. So something with a little point on it like that, that's really tiny. And also, if it's white like this, you can see the seeds more easily. But, some little baby spoon or something that you have in your kitchen that you can use, I think will help. I already talked about the kind of trays that I'm using. They're from Gardener's Supply Company in the US. But they're just, bigger. They're plastic trays. They have bigger holes in the bottom so you can kind of poke the holes when you need to take them out later, but poke through the holes. But anyway, so this is arugula seeds. I don't know that you can, they're so tiny. I think you can see them a little. So they're just those little dots. And I aimed to put about 3 or 4 in each cell tray, but some of them I put way more by accident, which, whatever, the seeds are so tiny. But then later I'm going to have to, which that's sort of an emotionally hard part for me. Later I have to get rid of the extra ones. So there's just one growing in each cell. So it's like you pick the survivor and you have to kill the others, which it shouldn't be heartbreaking, I guess, but I get a little too invested in these little seeds that are growing. So anyway, so when I'm planting seeds, usually I'm planting even more seeds at once than just kale, arugula, and basil, like in the spring. I have to start a whole bunch of seeds at once. But there are 3 things that I research so that I'm ready and I do it right for each different one, because not all seeds are the same. As far as like, so question number 1 is, does it need light to germinate? Because some seeds need light to germinate specifically, and so you can't cover them, or you can like barely cover them. Some seeds need darkness to germinate, in which case, it's good to, cover with soil, but not only that, like I cover the whole dome with something to keep light out, something opaque. So that's the first question. Does it need light to germinate? The second question is how deep in the soil? If you cover it with something, how deep in the soil should the seed be? And that's partially dictated by how small the seed is. And then the third question is, will it need a heat mat to germinate better? A heat mat, like, they sell them. It's yet another gardening supply. I didn't mention it in the first live stream, but I don't need it for any of these 3 that I'm doing today, kale, arugula, and basil. But a heat mat, I think, if I recall, tomatoes, you might need one for tomatoes. I don't remember what else you might. It depends on, your grow room, where you're growing, how warm that is. I'm growing in my house, in a room in my house that is kept at roughly, I mean, the house is kept at about 72 degrees. So I don't need a heat mat for any of these, kale, arugula, or basil. Your grow lights may make the environment warmer. So just factor that in too, because some things you don't want to be too warm, like for example, broccoli. I think kale too, they don't like really, really hot temperatures. So, there's sort of a sweet spot in there. But anyway, so I don't need a heat mat for any of these. So those are the three questions. Does it need light to germinate? How deep? What's the seed depth that's recommended? And will I need a heat mat to provide ideal germination temperatures for the seed? And so I looked that up for each of them, and I tend to consult multiple sources because you'll find different information when you look it up in different places. Like, does kale need light to germinate? And you look up in a bunch of places, or you Google it, and then you look up maybe like Johnny Seed Company, Johnny Seeds, I think it's johnnyseeds.com. They have growing information for like any type of seed. So even if I don't buy the seed from Johnny Seed Company, I might look up what they have to say about it. But it doesn't mean that I like listen to only them. I also Google it. So it seems like from my Googling and research that basil needs light to germinate. One place said it needs light to germinate. The others didn't say that, but I'm going to go with, I tend to go with whoever says to cover. I tend to do like less is more. Like I don't want to bury the seed too much. So, because then you won't get as good germination results. So I cover less. When in doubt, I cover less. So for example, seed depth for basil, Google said, yes, basil needs light to germinate. And then one place said, don't cover or just barely cover the seeds. And another place said, cover it a 1/4 inch deep, put them a 1/4 inch deep, like put a 1/4 inch layer of soil on top. So I'm going to err with less covering because I did see one place that said basil seeds need light to germinate. So what I'm going to do then for the basil seeds, and I didn't mention this as a supply in my first live stream, sorry about that, but I have this as a standard thing that I just keep around for when I'm seed starting, is vermiculite. And it's kind of see-through, so I guess light passes through it really well. So it looks like this kind of shiny dusty stuff. And so anyway, I'm going to use vermiculite, a layer of vermiculite, a thin layer of vermiculite on the top for my basil especially, because I want to keep the soil moist where the seeds are, but I also don't want to, if one place said basil needs light to germinate, basil seeds need light to germinate, I don't want to put a lot of soil on top of the seeds. So right now I'll just show you me putting basically only vermiculite on top of my basil seeds. So these are my basil seeds. I just put them in the soil. You can kind of see they're like little dots. I think they're dark black, so you can't really see them that well, but there are at least 3 or 4 basil seeds in each of the cells. And I'm just going to put light over. Oh, sorry, I'm just putting vermiculite over it. I'll show you it once I'm done. Okay, so I've put vermiculite over it. See, so it's like that. So there is a covering of vermiculite, but not a lot. Because I'll be pretty faithful with misting and stuff. Maybe I'll put a little more vermiculite on the end there. This one cell has maybe a little too little. Okay, so that's the vermiculite. And then I heard somewhere press it down. So I'm just going to lightly press it with my fingers along the whole surface of the soil because I want, and I got to be careful not to, because I have two different types of basil seeds. So I'm going to use a different finger to press down one type versus the other because I don't want to mix my types with my fingers when I'm like, because these seeds are so teeny. Okay, so I pressed it down. I just went pat, pat, pat with my finger lightly. So, because I want it to make good contact with the, I want the seed to make good contact with the soil. I want it all to touch. I don't want air pockets with my, and I already did, so now I'm using a mister, which is kind of messy. So thank goodness I'm holding my microphone away from there. But I'm misting the surface of everything because I want to wet the vermiculite. Because that's part of the purpose of covering it with vermiculite rather than not covering it at all, is that you mist the vermiculite and then it holds just a little bit of moisture there. So the seed doesn't dry out. You don't want the surface of the soil to dry out at all, especially if you haven't covered your seed much. So I'm going to show you what it looks like now with the vermiculite having used a mister. This is a mister. So it's a very, very delicate spray. It looks like a little fog. I showed it in the other live stream, the mister. So anyway, so that's what it looks like now. Those are my two varieties of basil. And I already put markers, right even before I put the seeds in, I put the markers for the rows so I know which variety is which. And I put the variety name and also the date on the marker because it's kind of cool to know, like, wow, it grew that much in only 3 days, or wow, because you can forget kind of when exactly you did it. So each marker has the date and the variety. So now I put the dome on top of it, and so it's ready to go on my grow shelf under grow lights. And that's it. So I'm going to do one of the other trays because I think I'll put like a really thin layer of seed starting mix, not potting soil, seed starting mix, a very thin, like dusting layer of seed starting mix on over one of them. And I want to show you that. And I'm going to mist it afterwards, not before. Because I don't want clumpiness on top of my seeds. Like a big old clump of seed starting mix. So I'm going to, when it's dry, it's easy to kind of dust it and be very delicate and put a nice little delicate layer over it. And then at the end, I'll mist it. But my soil is already wet before I even put it in the cell tray. And it's important with your soil. You don't want your soil to be too wet. Your potting soil or your seed starting mix. So if I show you here, like my oops, sorry about that. So if I show you my potting soil, this is my potting soil. It's already pre-moistened. I wet it in this tub carefully, and I mixed it. I added water gradually and mixed it in so that it would be wet, but there's no water coming out when I squeeze it. If there's like one drop, that's fine. But you don't want a whole bunch of water coming out if you squeeze it, especially for seeds starting. Like if you're potting up, maybe it's not quite as essential that, there's no water when you squeeze it. But see, right now, no water drops are coming out. If one or two came out, that would be fine too. But anyway, so that's how moist I want it. I want it moist, but not, more than that, because you don't want to encourage pests or mold or fungus. I mean, there is good bacteria and good fungus, but there's also bad fungus that can cause damping off of your seed. So that's why you got to be really kind of anal about how moist everything is. So I moistened the potting soil, and then in a separate container, in this separate container, I moistened some seed starting mix too, so that pre-moistened it before I put it in, and then I put the seeds in. Well, then I put the plant markers in, and then the seeds in carefully with my little baby spoon. And then, but anyway, so now I will use dry seed starting mix to dust it on the top, and then I'll moisten it with a spritzer so I have a lot of control over it. So I'll do that now. And that's for because I'm already done with my basil seeds. So I'm going to do it for the arugula, let's say. So again, this is dry potting soil, and I'm going to dust it over because I want just like maybe 1/8 of an inch covering at most over my arugula seeds. So less is more. So I put the dry potting soil, seed starting mix over just like a fine layer, very fine layer. I could have just done vermiculite really, but I'll do vermiculite as well because that light can go through that, so that's fine. Okay, but now since that top layer was dry material, I have to make sure to thoroughly moisten it, but not too much. with the mister. Okay, so I hope that was fine. I hope that my arugula seed got wet enough. Um, I think what I'm going to do, and I had to hold the mister away at a certain distance because it made everything blow around a little bit. Right, this is the finished product. And now I'm going to do the other seeds, which are my kale. You can barely see the kale seeds because they're a similar color to the wet seed starting mix. So whatever. But with this, when I researched it, the seed depth, somebody said a 1/4 inch seed depth for the kale seeds. So maybe I'll do the same thing. But I think first what I'll do is I'm going to very gently use the mister so I'm sure that the kale seeds have been wet. Okay, so now I'm sure that I've misted the kale seeds. I watched them as I was misting to make sure I didn't blow them out of the cell trays. And now I'm going to put a light layer of the dry seed starting mix so I can sprinkle it better and the vermiculite, but just not much, just because it said a 1/4 inch deep, but that's at most a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to try to aim more for an 1/8 inch covering. So first, this is the dry seed starting mix. Okay, and I didn't put a lot on, but now I'm gonna use the vermiculite. And now I'm going to wet it with the mister, make sure I get all that wet, but not too wet. Okay, and then I'm gonna just press it down a little bit with my finger. because somebody I listened to, they're like, well, you want to make sure that the seed makes good contact with the moist soil. So there's no air pockets. Okay, so that's that. I'm done. All I have to do is put the domes on so all three of them look like this. And they don't really need this lower thing that's called the water reservoir yet until well, once the seedlings start to germinate, and so you can see like little green sprouts coming out, when they're mostly all germinated, that's when you don't need the dome anymore and you take the dome off. And when the dome's on, you might not need to water at all because the dome controls the evaporation. So only spritz with a mist if you need it, if you think things are drying out, which you don't want it to dry out. For sure, you don't want it to dry out. So anyway, and then once you're not using a dome anymore because they've all germinated, you see little green sprouts, then carefully water it with a mister when it needs to be watered, right? But then you can also use this watering can, which I talked about in my other live stream, because it's really delicate. So you can make sure you're not clobbering your new little baby plants with water, right? And then eventually, when the seedlings are big enough that you figure, well, the roots are near the bottom or at the bottom, then you can bottom water using the reservoir, using this and you can bottom water with this thing. But until then, you don't bottom water because you don't want the whole thing saturated with water. So I hope that makes sense. And that is planting arugula, kale, and basil seeds to grow indoors. And this channel will have all sorts of things, not just gardening stuff. So, but I will have a gardening playlist. So if you only want to see the gardening stuff, you can check the gardening playlist on this channel. But there should also be other stuff that we put, like there's some old stuff about our pets on here. And who knows, maybe there'll be other live streams about different things. Okay, well, bye. I hope you enjoyed this and happy gardening. Take care.